Welcome back to the Airborne Lawyer YouTube channel and to another episode of the TBM 930 World Tour. Today you find me in Santiago, the capital city of Chile, and in this episode we are going to continue our journey north up the western side of South America to Bolivia, where we'll be visiting Uyuni, which is home of the world famous 10,000 square kilometre salt flats, and then La Paz, the capital city of Bolivia, situated over 10,000 feet above sea level. Now, I don't know Santiago at all. I'm yet to visit the city in real life, so right now I'm just exploring the city with the flight sim drone. We are currently approaching the city's northwest corner along the Autopista Nororiente, which is the twisting highway just running below us here. Santiago is, unsurprisingly, the largest city in Chile, with a population of around about 6 million people. It is the cultural, political and financial heart of the country, and though it's only 60 miles inland from the Pacific coast, the city is situated at between 1,500 and 2,000 feet above sea level, which is of course not uncommon for cities in this region. Santiago will in fact be, by some margin, the lowest lying destination which we will be visiting in this episode. The city was founded in 1541 and has a downtown core of 19th century neoclassical architecture and winding streets, sadly not yet replicated in intricate detail on Flight Sim 2020. This historical core, along with a large amount of more modern development, has managed to survive the large number of earthquakes which hit the city due to its location on the tectonic plates known as the Pacific Ring of Fire. So a few moments ago we climbed out of the city centre and up into the mountains just east of the city, called the Sierra de Ramon. The dramatic and picturesque landscape all around the capital is another obvious product of the high level of tectonic activity in this area. Some of the mountains just to the east of here tower up as high as 19,000 feet. But for now, we're descending back towards the city, down to the Aerodromo Eulogio Sanchez, where our TBM is parked up, ready for departure to the north. Okay, so a quick look at today's route. Very straightforward. Here's Santiago in Chile. We're going to be heading north for a few hours up to Uyuni, and then we'll continue on to La Paz, which will just be a pretty short flight. As always, I will time-lapse the cruises, so let's taxi out. Now, if you caught up with the last episode of the TBM 930 World Tour, you'll remember that when I landed here at the Eulogio Sanchez airfield, I discovered it was a very, very busy apron, and it's exactly the same now. Could not have timed that bit of narration better, because we've got another vehicle parked right in front of us. And he's moving off. Great. So this is a very busy apron. I have no idea how busy this small airfield is in real life, but it literally is a case of weaving around all the other vehicles in this rather confined space. Right, so let's go and taxi out to the runway. I've not practiced a takeoff from this airfield before. It's going to be interesting to see how it goes, because it's not the longest runway in the world. It should be absolutely fine for the TBM 930, but we are of course at altitude here. We are not at sea level, so I hope we've got enough space to take off safely. So get the landing lights on, pulse and strobe. Give it plenty of power as we take off into the dawn skies, hoping for a nice bit of sunrise once we've climbed up above these clouds. Okay, so away we go. Looking for a rotate speed of 90 knots. We're heading south at the moment on runway 19. So once we've taken off, I do hope we've got enough runway here. This is going to be close. Yeah, just in the nick of time. So yeah, we're going to continue heading south just for a short distance, then we'll turn to the right and to the right again and pick up our flight plan to the north. Spectacular night textures down here. So I think this is one of the distinguishing features of MSFS 2020. I mean, there are so many distinguishing features of MSFS 2020, but as a regular user of Prepare 3D V5, one of the things which is so much more realistic on Microsoft Flight Sim 2020 are the night light effects on the ground. It just looks so much more realistic. Let's turn to the right. So we're now heading back towards the core of the city, although it looks like we're about to go into the clouds here. And as we do so, time to say farewell to Santiago. Just taking a look at the terrain map on the centre screen there, you can see plenty of red behind me. That's the mountain range which we were taking a look at in the train just a short while ago. So the city disappearing into the gloom of the dawn clouds. So let's now turn to the right again. So we're going to be heading north, and very soon we are going to pick up our planned flight route. Pretty thin layer of clouds and some beautiful sunlight coming through now. So I will time-lapse the cruise as usual. And what I'm also going to try and do is capture the sun coming up over to the east from here. I'll speak to you a bit later on approach into Uyuni. And already just ahead of us you can see the Salt Flats at Uyuni just over there, look, absolutely enormous. And down here you can see our runway. This is my first visit to Bolivia in both the virtual world and the real world. I've never been to the country at all, and it looks like I'm arriving into a really tiny place. So the salt flats are clearly the biggest thing in the landscape anywhere, but just looking around this area you can see it's pretty remote. Frankly, it looks almost like an alien landscape out there. There's something of Mars about it, given that red copper colour to the rock down there, to the land. Uyuni is tiny by the looks of it. The airport looks like the biggest thing in the town itself. And worth saying a few things about the approach that we're doing at the moment. So I'm doing the VOR Yankee approach into runway 31. I mentioned earlier on in this episode that Santiago will be the lowest lying city that we'll visit on this episode, and Uyuni is at 12,000 feet above sea level. And that makes the approach a little bit more challenging because it can kind of trick you as to how high up you are. So for that reason, even though I've got a decent visual of the runway, I've decided to do a proper instrument approach here, and I'm currently doing the VOR Yankee approach into runway 31. Let's just pull up the chart on that and take a quick look at it. So I am currently turning to 154 degrees to head back to the Uyuni VOR. I will then cross the Uyuni VOR and continue on 154 degrees before looping back round to the left to pick up the course, the 308 degree course back towards the Uyuni VOR, which I should meet at about 12 miles out. I've never done this before, so I'm sort of finding my way with it as I go, but I just want to follow the procedure if I can, so that I can in particular have a good sense of where I'm meant to be at which point in terms of altitude. So when I get to the point 12 miles out from Uyuni on the 308 radial back into the VOR, I need to be at 14,700 feet. Having a little bit of difficulty really getting onto that VOR radial. Quite close to the VOR, so I guess it's going to be fairly sensitive. I think I'm just about on it now, but again you see I'm just going to slightly overshoot it, so I'm snaking around a bit here. But I've never flown to this airport before, I've never flown this procedure before. I'm just finding my feet with it really. And just relying on that procedure to give me the safest route into the airport. You can just see the landmass down there is quite uneven. There's a lot of unexpected lumps and bumps around, so I just don't want to risk running into any terrain when I'm this unfamiliar with the landscape. So we're now right over the top of the VOR. Just gone over the top of the airport basically. Now coming out the other side, again just trying to hold on to the 154 radial. And I'm just going to continue along this path, this course, for around about another 9 or 10 miles. And I'm doing a very gentle descent down to 14,700 feet. once I've reached 14,700 feet, I'm going to hold that until I've established myself on the inbound 308 radial, at which point I should then be nicely aligned with the runway. We shall see. I don't have huge amounts of practice at flying VOR approaches. I've done tons of ILS approaches, but in comparison, frankly, they're pretty easy. I've done quite a few RNAVs, but I'm just trying my hand at something a bit different here. But that, of course, is half the fun. Once we have landed in Uyuni, we will get the drone out, go over and see the salt flats, which should be fun. I mean, obviously, to be fair, there's not a huge amount to see. They're just big, open, flat spaces of salt. But then again, it's clearly quite a unique feature. So, since we're in the area, we may as well go and see them. One particularly interesting thing about the airports in this part of the world is the length of the runways, and of course we are at altitude here. The airport elevation here in Uyuni is 12,000 feet above sea level. We have a decision altitude of 12,530 feet, and that has a big impact as a result on takeoff performance. The air's much thinner up here, and all aircraft will need an awful lot more runway to build up enough speed to then take off. And it was obviously noticeable just looking down the runway a few moments ago when we flew over the top of it that it's a lot longer, and it'll be very interesting to see what kind of takeoff performance we get from the TBM 930 when we depart. The takeoff from Santiago was a little bit hairy. I didn't leave much room for error, but that runway was a fraction of the size of this one. But even then, you know, it was clear that takeoff performance was affected by being at around about 2,000 feet above sea level when we took off from Santiago. This is a whole different ball game altogether, really. We're at 12,000 feet here when we take off, so the air is getting very, very thin. Okay, so we're now turning back towards the airport at long last, and the runway should now be right in front of us. Obviously just cross-checking with the navigation display in the centre left screen in the cockpit here, I can see that the runway should just be, well, it's kind of at 11 o'clock actually. I'm just going to turn slightly to the right here to try and better align myself with the inbound radial into the VOR. If you look at the primary flight display, there's that circle compass at the bottom, and I'm just waiting for that green line to come across the centre just like that, and that should then have me on a decent heading straight back towards the airport. But of course the visibility today is really good. It's very clear. There's a little bit of light cloud around, but nothing which is going to cause us any trouble on the way in. So I should soon be visual with the runway itself. As you may have seen a moment ago, I disconnected the autopilot, so I'm now flying this by hand. And I am now, I think, just about visual with the runway. There's lots of interesting shapes and colours down here. It's an unfamiliar terrain to be flying into. Unfamiliar sort of colour patterns, and easy, I would imagine, to lose situational awareness, but I can now see a distinctive straight line of tarmac in front of me. One thing which I do want to do here is be careful to maintain airspeed because of the high altitude which we're landing in. If I lose too much airspeed, it will be quite difficult to get that airspeed back because, again, as I said a moment ago, the air is just so thin around here. I don't know if anyone watching the channel has, you know, tried out landing at Lukla or any other high altitude places, but it can be really difficult if you drop below VREF. To try and get that speed back is quite tricky. You just do not get great engine performance. And again, for those people who think this is just some kind of easy game that you can pick up in 5 minutes, that just shows how hard flight sim can be and how much know-how you have to pick up if you're going to get it right. So the tiny city, town, settlement of Uyuni just coming up in front of us here, and then the runway just beyond it. So doing this entirely by sight. There aren't any PAPI lights. I can't go on the... can't be judging the glide slope by reference to the 2 red, 2 white lights at the side of the runway this time around, so it felt like I've come in a little bit shallow, although we've managed to flatten it out further in, and I think we're about right now. And this vast runway just stretching off way into the distance. As I say, it will be very interesting to see just how much of this runway we need to use up when we're looking to depart from here in just a few moments' time. And there we go. We landed with a convincing thump on the runway. Just braking quite rapidly here, so that we can make this exit just on the right hand side. There we go. A fairly high speed exit from the runway there. Interesting to see that I've got the warning come up here about cabin pressure, and that again is indicative of the fact that we are at very high altitude. It is in fact telling me that I should be wearing a mask for oxygen. I am a stickler for realism in my flight simming, but I'm afraid I don't carry an oxygen mask with me on my virtual flights. So we'll just turn off strobes and the landing lights as we just taxi in here. I'll just loop round on this yellow line. Doesn't really matter where we park up, but I will do this since the line is here. Just straighten her up. And let's get the plane shut down. Okay, that's everything pretty much switched off. Shut down the engine and we can open up the doors, head outside and go and explore. Okay, so that is the Uyuni Salt Flats, the Salar de Uyuni. And our journey now continues. We're now continuing north for another 300 miles up to La Paz, the capital of Bolivia. Our second and final stop in this high altitude country. So I got the plane prepared during our little sightseeing stop there over the Salt Flats, and we're ready to head straight out. And this is going to be the moment of truth as regards takeoff performance. How much of this massive runway does our trusty little TBM 930 require in order to get off the ground? It could be quite a lot, so out of an abundance of caution, I am going to go to the end of the runway. Get the landing lights on and the strobes. I am actually doing this flight on VATSIM. You wouldn't know it, there is literally nothing else here, but still, for authenticity's sake, I am flying in the virtual world. We have a decent headwind here, just looking at the windsock a few moments ago. You can see it's a decent headwind pretty much straight down the runway, so that should help us get up into the skies. But I am expecting this takeoff roll to be significantly longer than what we are used to. Normally with a TBM it's almost a case of it's difficult to keep the thing on the ground, there's so much power, but let's see what happens here. Okay, so let's just pull up just to a last check of all the various switches and controls. And as I'm on VATSIM, I ought to just tune myself into Unicom. I doubt very much that I'm going to hear much other traffic around this area, and away we go. So let's throttle up, and even now I can just feel this is so much more sluggish. This feels like I'm taking off a Cessna rather than a TBM 930 right now. Finally, it's a little bit hesitant, But we are in the air. There we go. That is by far the longest takeoff roll I've ever done in the TBM, and you can see even now that the angle of attack is so much lower. Normally at this point it's just almost rocket-like, pointing upwards and shooting itself into the skies, but this is a far less confident takeoff, to say the very least. I'm not looking to do anything excessive in terms of vertical speed here, just a nice stable climb out. Above all else, looking to maintain airspeed to avoid an inadvertent stall. So we're just going to turn off to the right now and pick up our flight route up to La Paz. Flight time should be around about an hour. I will time-lapse it, of course, in a few moments' time. But for me, here in the cockpit, it's going to be about an hour to get up to the Bolivian capital. So taking one last look at the Salt Flats over to our left-hand side. It's been a really unique thing to come and see. Never seen anything quite like it. You're not looking at mountains and landscapes which are sort of conventionally dramatic. You're looking at something really very different, very unusual. So this has been a very worthwhile stop. But of course the journey now continues. More high altitude fun. Another high altitude landing coming up very shortly in La Paz. And I will speak to you in a few moments' time once we are on our approach. Welcome back to the flight, and welcome to La Paz. Quick bit of sightseeing from outside the plane a few moments ago, just to take in some of the beautiful scenery which is off to our right hand side. Once again, we are blessed with very good weather on approach here, so we can really take in some of this stunning scenery. We are on approach, we are descending, but we will not have to descend anywhere near as far as you might ordinarily expect to descend when approaching an airport, because the elevation in the international airport here in La Paz is 13,300 feet above sea level, which is truly astonishing. I've taken a close look at the charts again. I just want to make sure I'm doing a decent approach. It can obviously be so misleading when you're dealing with these kind of altitudes. It also looks like the airport is on quite uneven terrain. I think we might be landing on a bit of an uphill slope from the look of it. We're going to land on runway 10. One benefit of landing into this airport over Uyuni is we have got a full ILS available, so I'm going to make use of that since it's there. We're just about to fly overhead runway. We will then turn to the left, do a bit of a downwind and then loop back round to join the ILS, there is the tip of runway 10 just down there. So we'll be looping back round and landing there very, very shortly. As we do so, worth clarifying that La Paz is actually not the constitutional capital of Bolivia. The city of Sucre is the constitutional capital of the country. However, La Paz is the executive capital of Bolivia. It's the seat of government, and it's also got the biggest financial centre in the country, but it's not the biggest city in terms of population. La Paz is actually the third most populous city in Bolivia, with an estimated 816,000 residents as of 2020. It's amazing what a little bit of Google research can provide you with during a flight sim flight before you do some video narration. One thing which is well worth knowing about La Paz, if you fancy a visit, is it is really cold. So there are only 4 months a year during which the temperature in La Paz achieves an average of higher than 10 degrees Celsius. Now I think often the weather is quite bright, but if you're a sun seeker, be prepared to have to layer up if you're visiting La Paz, because you might get to see some nice bright sunshine like we're flying through right now, but it's likely to be very cold. Even though so much of South America is scorching hot, particularly further north of course, but this, because of its high altitude, is a very, very cold part of South America. This is our second and final stop in Bolivia after Uyuni. However, our high altitude journey after La Paz will continue, not in this episode but in the next episode, when we fly on to Cusco. So we've got a few shorter flights coming up as we make our way into Peru, heading towards the capital city of Lima, and that is going to present me with lots of challenging landings, where at each occasion I've got to be really careful to maintain airspeed and not let the very thin high altitude air get the better of me. So some random facts about La Paz, just whilst we're making our way in on the ILS into runway 10. It has the world's craziest prison. San Pedro prison is reportedly home to cocaine labs that produce some of the finest gear in the whole of Bolivia. And inside the prison, I mean, it's tragic in a way, sorry I shouldn't really laugh, but children live with their families in the prison and leave the prison just to go to school. And at one point, tourists were even able to take guided tours of the prison and party the night away in jail. One feels that's not quite, I mean, it's clearly not conventional. I'm not quite sure that's achieving very much from a kind of jail experience perspective. In addition, they have traffic wardens in La Paz who are dressed up in zebra costumes. So I found this on just like a fact page about La Paz. I can find no explanation about why people dress up in zebra costumes or what the history and origins of the zebra costumes are, but apparently these costumes are now a much loved part of the city's culture. So look out for some human zebras directing traffic if you ever come to La Paz. And in addition to all that, there is a clock on the House of Congress located in downtown La Paz, where the clock runs backwards. So where the 11 should be, there's a 1, where the 10 should be, there's a 2, where the 9 should be, there's a 3, and so on. It all goes backwards and the clock ticks backwards. And this was apparently designed to in some way pay homage to Bolivia's indigenous heritage and help people reflect on their pre-colonial roots. I assume something to do with, you know, time going backwards and drawing people in to the past. But that's something else to look out for should you ever visit this city. So we are now on our final approach. You can see the runway just ahead of us here. Again, lots of bright colours on the navigation display in the centre of the cockpit. The green means I can clear the train comfortably. The yellow means I'm going to need to climb, and the red means I would not be able to clear that. So very challenging terrain around here. Looks quite densely populated as well down here. Bit busier, a bit more about it than Uyuni certainly. But at the same time, not quite as big and densely populated as Santiago was at the beginning of this episode. So as always, just constantly cross-checking the primary flight display against the runway. Making tiny adjustments to the approach profile. If you look at the primary flight display, you can see that the line of the horizon is a little bit misleading, which again means I've just got to be careful to maintain airspeed because I'm more nose up than it feels like I am. It looks like I'm quite nose down, but actually I'm about level with the horizon. So you've just got to be careful about that. And it's helpful to have the ILS on at least. And it is another massive runway. And there we go. Welcome to La Paz. So that's about it from episode 14 of the TBM 930 World Tour. In episode 15, as I mentioned a few moments ago, we are going to be making our way into Peru and then on to Ecuador. So we've got Cusco, Lima and Quito to visit in episode 15, which as soon as I've had the opportunity to fly it, I will put up on YouTube. And in starting to head up towards Ecuador, we are then very much back into the north of South America, if that makes any sense. We will be in Quito, will be around about the back on the equator, which we haven't been to or been near since we visited Manaus a few episodes ago. So we are slowly but surely starting to get close to the end of the South American adventure, which we've been enjoying very much. on this epic TBM 930 World Tour. Really interesting. The undulation in this airport feels a bit like a roller coaster ride. It's clearly a bit up and down dale, as they say. We're just going to park up over here, get the plane shut down, and call it a day. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and please check out the channel again soon for further episodes of the TBM 930 World Tour. If you have enjoyed watching, please do click on the like button. Please click on subscribe so you get to hear about new videos as and when I get the chance to put them up. And look out for more short and long haul flying, both on Prepare 3D and on MSFS 2020 here on the Airborne Lawyer YouTube channel, coming very soon. Thanks for watching.